wow, nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little boy.
That's great. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, so we are in Job. We are getting close to the end of Job. There are 42 chapters in Job. We're going to be getting into Job chapter 40 tonight, but first we're going to go through chapter 30 and talk about it. This chapter is a. Can anybody tell me what's going on in Job right now?
Job, right now, the Lord is speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and he was speaking to Job and his friends.
Yep. So he's, but where is his direction right now? Where's his focus? Who's he speaking to directly to right now? So right now he is speaking directly to Job. He's talking to him about these things. And we're going to be seeing what God has to say to Job in response to everything that Job had said up to this point. What we're going to find is that God isn't answering Job. This whole situation, this isn't the way Job thought it was going to go. Job had this. How did Job think this was going to go when he came before God and God on his judgment seat and stuff? What was Job thinking was going to happen?
Was he thinking that he would just get healed and everything would be made all right?
Eventually, but what was he going to do before that? Because remember, he's like, God has brought all this evil on me. That's his thoughts. So what does he think that he has to do before he gets restored?
To overcome.
He thinks that he needs to persuade God to be like, Lord, some sort of mistake has occurred. I'm a righteous man. I don't deserve all this suffering. So he wanted to appeal to God, to present his case before God, saying, I'm a righteous man, and there's been some terrible mistake. I shouldn't be suffering like this. And then God would be like, oh, you're right. Here's all your wealth and all your health and everything, and here's kids and all that stuff. So that's what he was thinking. But is that how it's going? Like, God's here now, and what's happening?
Senator, remember we were talking about Job's friends? What's their names?
Eliphaz. Well, Elihu's the young man. He's never actually listed among Job's friends.
Oh, okay.
But didn't Job try to sell him to, like, go against the Lord, or no?
No. No.
Oh,
No.
Lord.
That
Oh,
was his wife.
That was his wife. Yeah, his wife was like, curse God and die.
Oh,
But nobody else has been like go against God except for the Satan, who wants Job to curse God.
right.
Yeah, the Satan's like, if you cause enough suffering in Job's life, then he's going to curse you to your face just like everyone else. Yeah.
And also Job was looking for answers from God,
Yeah.
how far is this gonna go on, when am I gonna get through this situation? And, so, I mean, you're gonna be teaching out of chapter 40 tonight, it's like, I think now Job sees the picture, about, I'm gonna get through this thing, because I know God is with me. And I'm looking for answers, I'm looking for a message from God, and that's how I see this in chapter 40.
Yeah. Job is going to definitely see a picture, but he does want it to end for sure. But the way that God is talking to him, it's not actually providing him any kind of answer as to whether or not it's going to end. So like right now, So Job's friends are Eliphaz, Zophar, and Bildad.
Yeah.
God is talking to Job right now, and God isn't providing him answers that Job is asking for. The kinds of questions that Job was asking were things like, "Why am I suffering?" You know, and that was the main one. He's like, "I want to know why I'm suffering. Why is this taking place?" And what he was struggling with is that God, there must have been some sort of mistake. You know, God, if I can just present him with my case, he will see that I shouldn't be suffering like this and that I will be restored. But the way God is talking right now, God's not giving him the answers to why he's suffering. God doesn't say why he's suffering. He also doesn't give Job any indication yet, at least, that there's going to be an end to his suffering. So Job is like, before God even showed up, he was like, God has hit me with all this, and I know that he has more that he can hit me with. You know, God has hit me real hard. He's my enemy right now, and the worst, there's more to come. There's even more that he could do to me. And so Job is like, I need to talk to God before this worst thing happens, so that I can just present my case before him. But Elihu, he was different with it. He wasn't saying that Job was suffering because of any form of punishment or anything like that. But he was saying that suffering can be a means of instruction, as well as in times going towards correction. And so and he was just telling Job that he must, like, Job, the reason why, what was the reason why Job wasn't suffering before?
I think that God put a hedge of protection around him.
Exactly. The Satan was complaining about God putting a hedge of protection around him. And Elihu was saying, during his speech that, Job, you and your friends are very judgmental about the wicked, but you have had a hedge of protection around you your whole life, and that is why, and the evidence of that is his great riches. There are people who have suffered with being destitute, being impoverished, being sickly, their entire lives. You're just now, they've never experienced the comfort of being rich, of having servants. They've never experienced that kind of stuff, and yet now you are receiving a taste of it. And he was warning Job. He was like, you gotta be careful, because on the trajectory that you're on, you're gonna be among the mockers and scoffers. He wasn't accusing Job of mocking and scoffing, but he was upset that Job was trying to justify himself rather than God. And so God comes in now, and he is talking to Job, and what he went through was, he was talking that God started talking about the weather.
Yeah.
And what are the things that God started talking about in chapter 38? He started talking about the stars. He started talking about creation and things like that. He started emphasizing his power. He started emphasizing his knowledge. He started emphasizing his goodness as it relates to these great things. And he was asking a bunch of rhetorical questions. Job and his friends were having a battle of wisdom. They were battling each other with regard to who has the greater wisdom. Did Job's friends have the greater wisdom with their groundedness, in which they ground it? Like we've discussed before, Eliphaz grounded his wisdom in personal experience, like dreams and visions and stuff like that. Bildad grounded his wisdom in the ancients. Job grounded his wisdom in his observations of how the world is. Zophar grounded his observations in a flawed understanding of God's character. So, and what God is emphasizing here, what he's doing with these rhetorical questions is revealing through these questions how much greater he is than Job and his friends. And this greatness should cause somebody to trust him. God is expressing himself like, look how wise I am. Look how intelligent I am. Look how powerful I am. You should be able to reasonably infer from these situations and conditions that I am all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly wise, and perfectly good. And if I am those things, then you have to, 1, submit to me, and 2, you have to trust me. You need to recognize that I do know your behavior, I do know that you're a righteous man, Job, and yet I have justification for causing you to suffer like this, and you do not need to know why. It would be actually inappropriate for God to capitulate to Job and be like, this is exactly why you're suffering. Because Job is diverted from recognizing his proper place. He's not really treating God the way that God ought to be treated. If one of Job's servants had been questioning Job's motives, Job's decisions, and stuff like that, and was brazenly questioning Job's wisdom and his behavior and stuff, Job in the ancient times would not have tolerated that. It would have been like this. He's like, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer twice, but I will proceed no further. So this is what a wise man does. A wise man receives rebuke, correction, and he takes it on board. He submits to wisdom, or she, A wise person submits to wisdom. A wise person submits to God. A wise person takes on rebuke. They are not too proud to humble themselves and receive rebuke. Okay, so this is the good thing that Job is doing here. So let's read through. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we read through 39 and discuss 39 and then go into 40?
So with the issue of Job, after God gave him back all his things, when did the wife say? Because initially the wife said, "Let's go."
Yeah, the wife's never really addressed whether or not she comes back or whether or not it's through a different spouse. Yeah, so Job does get a double portion back. He does get the same number of kids again, 10 kids.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, he had 10 kids before, they all died, and then you get, but since everything's doubled, this is a hint that Job does. A lot of the questions regarding Job is that our human lives are, the grave is final. There is no afterlife. But there's hints throughout Job that that's not the case, that Job and his friends are wrong in having this belief. And one of the hints is that Job gets a double portion of everything, but he gets the same number of kids, which indicates that in the end, he's going to have 20 kids, because of the afterlife, everyone's raised again. So he had 10 kids, and 10 kids plus 10 plus 10 equals 20, and that's a double portion, So, that indicates this is a hint from the book of Job that there's more to life than this physical reality that we're living in. But Job and his friends at this point aren't consciously aware of it. Sometimes Job starts to go that route, but in his suffering, gets diverted from it, So, any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and I'll read through chapter 39, and then we'll discuss it. All right, so do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth? When they crouch, bring forth their offspring and are delivered of their young? Their young ones become strong. They grow up in the open. They go out and do not return to them. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosed the bonds of the swift donkey? To whom I have given the arid plain for his home, and the salt land for his dwelling place. He scorns the tumult of the city. He hears not the shouts of the driver. He ranges the mountains as his pasture, and he searches for every green thing. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow of ropes? Or will he harrow the valleys after you? Will you depend on him because his strength is great, and will you leave him to your labor? Do you have faith in him that he will return your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are they the pinions and plumage of love? She leaves her eggs on the earth and lets them be warmed on the ground, forgetting that a foot may crush them and that the wild beast may trample them. She deals cruelly with her young, as if they are not hers. Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear, because God has made her forget wisdom and given her no share in understanding. When she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horse and his rider. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrifying. He paws in the valley and exults in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattle the quiver, the flashing spear and the javelin. With a fierceness and rage he swallows the ground. He cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads its wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home, on the rocky crag and stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there he is. So what do you guys think?
I think it shows how mighty God is,
Yeah.
you know, and he's trying to get that point across to Job.
Yeah.
Like the song says, what a mighty God we serve. Heaven and earth adore him, angels bow before him.
Yeah, and it's interesting in verse 9, God mentions the wild ox. And in the King James Version, this word is,
Unicorn.
yeah, it's rendered unicorn.
I don't understand that. How does it become an ox to a unicorn? A unicorn's a horse with one horn.
Right,
An
and
ox is a cow with two horns.
right, yeah, that's because the word here that's rendered wild ox is a very rare word in the Hebrew, and so it's not exactly understood how to render it. In the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it says the one-horned. And that's why the King James Version renders it unicorn. And some people think that this unicorn is actually referring to a rhinoceros.
I thought it was a horse, like a mythology creature.
Right.
From Greek myth.
Yeah, but that's not really Greek myth.
I
The
used to
unicorn, as
love
we...
unicorns, and I used to read books when I was a little kid, and it was like Pegasus and unicorns, and I used to like reading that stuff on the fake animals that aren't even there. The half goat boy.
When you read the King James Version the one that we read now
Yeah.
was published in 1711.
Wow, this one?
What version do you have?
King James.
Yeah, that's 1711.
Wow, that's a lot. That's old.
Yeah, it's old. Yeah, and so when you look at the dictionaries that were written at that time, the English for this unicorn is different than what we have for it now. Now we think of a one-horned horse, but back in the day,
But
but
you're reading that, I'm like, okay.
but back in the day, a unicorn can easily refer to a one-horned rhinoceros.
Oh, yeah, that's
There's
true.
two forms of rhinoceros, a two-horned rhinoceros and a
Yeah.
one-horned rhinoceros. And the two-horned rhinoceros was a unicorn or rhinoceros bicornus,
Oh,
but the single-horned rhinoceros was rhinoceros unicornus.
oh, wow.
So there's a lot of people that think that the King James, when it says a unicorn, is referring to a one-horned rhinoceros, and rhinoceroses are typically very difficult to tame.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're so and that's what God's referring to here.
Yeah, I was
But
just
it could-
confused a little bit. I'm like, why is there a unicorn in here?
Yeah, but it could also, be referring to a different kind of ox that's now extinct
Yeah.
that was very large and was not tameable as well. And so there's a lot of debate on it. But the point of it is that what God is saying here is that this ox
Yeah,
doesn't serve you,
yeah,
but it serves me. That's the point, and and God is approaching these animals from different points of view to
yeah,
express his majesty in different ways. Like the ox doesn't serve you. He laughs at you trying to get him to serve you, but he serves me. You don't know how the mountain goat gives birth. You don't know how it traverses traverses the terrain, but I created it to traverse those mountainous. Have you guys ever seen? They've been tying like GoPros to mountain goats.
yeah.
Have you seen them jumping over the rocky mountains and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's extremely impressive how they're able to descend and ascend these near vertical cliffs. And God's saying, I created him to do that, Do you know the number of months they fulfill? These goats are very hard to find, very hard to keep track of for them back then. So they couldn't know these kinds of things. Very different from their own goats, which they just keep in a pen and they perfectly understood. And God's like, you know about this goat, but do you know about this goat? And the answer is no, but God does know. Or like the wild donkey. You know the donkey, but this wild donkey, which may even be like a zebra, untamable, it laughs at the city. It laughs at people in society and culture and stuff like that. It's like, you don't need that. You guys are imprisoned behind your walls and I'm free. And God's like, I created this beast to be free. You have enslaved this donkey, but this one is free, and it's free because of my will.
That's almost like the peacock in here that they mentioned.
Ostrich?
Or it says, gavest thou godly wings unto the peacock, or wings and feathers unto the ostrich.
Ah, yeah.
And some animals you can't tame,
No,
Right.
and
no, those are very hard animals to tame. An ostrich or a peacock? Oh my.
yeah, some become very difficult, but that's the way it is. When I said that I believe God was saying how, in 39, about he is a great God, but Job also had to fear him.
Yeah.
Because if you don't fear God, I mean, greater things can happen in people's lives.
Yeah.
And what happened to Job, through all this here, I mean, he continued to preserve and pray and ask God's help, but he was very questionable to God, and God had answered him and said, You know, I want an answer from you, you know, where you're at with me. And so I think, you know, chapter 4 he brings that out a little bit more, you know, I mean, and we can see the results of what happened in his life, you know, and as you said, how God gave him back more than what he had in the beginning.
Yeah. Yep. And that's definitely what God's doing.
But God didn't tell him that right away,
Right.
you know, so.
And we do know from earlier in the book that Job has a fear of God.
Yeah.
You know, Job does fear God, but does he fear God correctly? Could he fear him better? And that's what you're getting at. Yeah, he could fear him better. You know, Job expressed that was the reason for why he acted righteously, is because he was afraid of what God could do to him. And so, and this is where it gets dangerous, because Job was afraid of God, of the kind of power that God could exercise against Job, and the extent to which he could punish him and harm him and make him to suffer. That was the motivation for Job's righteousness. And now that he has experienced that kind of suffering, even though he was righteous, it's caused him to go into chaos. It's like, I don't understand what's happening anymore. I still fear God because I know that he has more in store for me, but it seems that even though I was righteous, it didn't protect me from the pain and suffering that he can inflict on me. You
Well,
know?
wait a minute, now, what you're saying, what he inflicted on him, God didn't inflict anything on him. He allowed Satan to take all this stuff away from his family, his house, his
Right.
possessions, and so on.
But we got to remember, that's not Job's. He doesn't know that. Job definitely believes that God Job never once mentions Satan. He never once mentions demons.
No.
He thinks that God did this, and that's what I'm saying. That's what Job thinks.
Yeah,
But another thing is that God never says that it wasn't me who did this, it was Satan. God never relieves responsibility for it. God has no problem taking responsibility for it because he is the one who told the Satan that he could. You know, so God has the responsibility. So in order for God to give that kind of command to the Satan, then God needs to have justification for doing it.
yeah, sure, I agree.
God doesn't provide that justification because he doesn't need to.
Yeah,
We need to trust that he does have it regardless.
sure.
So even though the Satan did do it, it was he only could do it because God gave him permission to do
Yeah,
it.
he allowed him to do it.
Yep, but I mean, like,
The only thing he wouldn't allow is to take his life.
right.
But you know that, I know that, so.
Yeah, so that's what Job is struggling with. He's like, God has caused all the suffering, and I thought my righteousness was going to protect me, and it has up to this point, and now it doesn't. So what's going on? And
Yeah,
so God right now is expressing different things. And then he expresses his greatness through the ostrich, you know, which is kind of odd. You know, it's like, how does talking about the ostrich, how it doesn't give any concern to its young and things of that nature, how does that express God's glory? You know, what's God trying to show here? Not trying, but what is God showing here? When I read it, it seems that to me, and I'm also kind of like wondering why it is the case that God talks about the ostrich in these terms. But it seems to me that God, even though this creature is ill fit for the propagation of its species, nevertheless, it does still survive.
Oh yeah, it puts its head in the ground all the time.
Yeah, So it seems that this creature that doesn't care for its young isn't, very effective at preserving its own life, even if we are to believe that it just sticks its head in the ground, which is not the case, but still.
I always see ostriches sometimes. They're not like they walk around and then that's like head in the ground like that.
Yeah, that's like a old wives' tale. It's like a thing that you see in cartoons and stuff.
Yeah, and
But
ostrich sticking there.
yeah, but it is but it does express something about the ostrich, that it's not very smart,
No, not.
and yeah, it's not a very smart creature. It doesn't have regard to its young. It doesn't have very good survival instincts itself. It's,
Yeah.
and this is the case with some birds,
Yeah.
like the dodo or
Yeah.
turkeys or things like that. And yet they survive.
Even deer. They're not the brightest animals.
Yeah, they're pretty smart, though. They definitely care more for their young and the propagation of their species than ostriches. But what the point here is that the ostrich does a good job of demonstrating God's active preservation in the world. That even if a creature is prone to self-destruction, yet God will preserve them. Yes?
Simon, in the scriptures anyway, they talk about dinosaurs?
No.
No, serious.
Uh,
No.
Not really.
Do they ever exist?
Well, dinosaurs existed for sure.
But they're not in the Bible.
It depends on what you mean. Some people think that at least some of the dinosaurs, like the T-Rex and other, fanged dinosaurs, are actually what the dragon would be dragons,
Right.
and things like that. And this is a huge rabbit hole that we don't really have time to get into tonight. But whether or not the dinosaurs are millions of years old or not is a big debate.
Right.
Among Christians.
Yeah.
Well, it's evident that they walked the earth, in different
Yeah.
lots.
Yeah.
And how they all died at once, it's a mystery, I guess. A lot of scientists have theories on that.
Yeah,
you
maybe
know,
yours hit the earth and exploded.
like a meteor struck the earth and killed them.
Yeah, that's what I always used to hear about the dinosaurs. I always used to hear that.
That's a
as kid.
science, that's not even scientifically proven,
Maybe it was God that got rid of them for a reason.
Yeah.
To put these nicer animals and these crazy animals and compare. In the Job verse.
I know in the Bible it talks about wild beast, and that could refer to dinosaurs back then or whatever, but.
Yeah.
Or the wild
Simon
boar.
says dragons, but
Hmm.
there's nothing mentioned about the word dinosaur
Yeah.
in the Bible.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of conversation about it.
It's just
We can talk about it some other time if you want.
Yes.
it's just like aliens coming from outer space and spaceships, There's nothing like that in the Bible, It's like
Well, some people think that Ezekiel talks about that kind of stuff.
Oh wow.
The book of Ezekiel, yeah, where it sounds like when Ezekiel's describing a wheel and a wheel inside a wheel, and that it's flying in the air and it emits light. He's like, some people are like, this kind of sounds like a flying saucer, and stuff like that. So there are people that do think that there are aliens described in the Bible, but yeah. But that's not the conversation for tonight. Tonight we're interested in the animal kingdom and how the animal kingdom displays God's glory. But what about the horse? What do you guys think about the horse?
The horse represents strength.
Yeah, the horse represents strength, but it's interesting In what way?
Like his neck, his body, his physique.
Yes, that's true, but in regard to God's making a specific point for a particular event that humans have a tendency to do towards each other.
I always think horses represent like strength and everything, and majestic, like majesty.
Yes, but what about verse 25?
25. It says, he sat among the trumpets. Ha ha ha, he smelled the battle afar off, the thunder of captains shouting, in the shouting.
So what's that in reference to?
Trumpets, heaven.
No.
Because
What?
I'm thinking trumpets is heaven with the angels.
So God is talking about how the horse, he goes out to meet the weapons.
Yeah.
He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattled a quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. So what is God referring to here? Is he referring to hunting? Is he referring to a leisurely stroll in the park?
No. Hunting, I'm thinking hunting.
Not hunting.
Weapons.
What kind of event?
But
Is he referring to traveling? Or is he referring to war? Or is he...
war. Basically, the Trojan horse.
Yeah, but he's not referring to the Trojan horse. He is referring to war, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God is referring to war.
Okay.
All right? So what God is talking about is that the horse is well equipped to aid humanity in battle.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
Yeah, so when he's talking about the weapons, he's talking about the sword, he's talking about the quiver and the flashing spear and the javelin. This is war language.
All right.
And so God is talking about how he has made an animal that is well equipped for war and has made armies more effective by their use. Like the cavalry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or-
The
yeah.
cavalry. The cavalry. So God is expressing himself as being involved in war. He is a God, he is a warrior. God is a warrior, and he has made creatures that are effective at war. Okay? When God is is called the Lord of hosts, those hosts that are being referred to are angelic armies.
Okay.
Okay? God goes out to battle. All right? He is our warrior. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
God is very much involved with war. Especially if you read the book of Revelation. And then he starts talking about the soaring eagle. And the soaring eagle, like the way that the eagle soars in the air, that we have entire battle airplanes that are
Yeah.
based off of how an eagle or a hawk is shaped and things of that nature. We're still learning how these creatures fly and how to make our own machines better by studying them. So the way the eagle soars, and this is something that we're still learning even in 2026. Do you think that Job knows anything about this?
No.
Job doesn't know a thing about it. As far as he's concerned, that eagle could be levitating. What?
The eagle
Yes?
represents what?
That's what I'm talking about. What do you think it represents?
I don't know, that's why I asked.
To me, it demonstrates God's intellect. Because the eagle, as it's soaring, we're still in 2026 learning how these creatures soar.
Yeah.
What makes them so good at soaring? What makes them so good at flying? And we are incorporating that information into our
That's
machines.
interesting, though.
Jets and helicopters.
That's an
and so on and
interesting
so forth.
fact.
Yes, we are learning how to make our machines better by observing what God has already created thousands of years ago.
See, that's a good. Wow.
This is something that Job would have never imagined. He doesn't understand this. Remember, God is asking these things for a point. Some of it has to do with knowledge, some of it has to do with power, some of it has to do with goodness. Power with regard to being able to control the wild ox,
Yeah.
intelligence with regard to the soaring eagle, and goodness with regard to the ostrich. You know?
Yeah.
So with the eagle, the reason why I asked this stuff, I know we have some pastors that say their spiritual animals are eagle, and then they go ahead to explain that the eye, the eagle, so you can see everywhere, whatever you are doing, if you like, whether spiritual, physical, wherever you are, if you try to harm or try to attack him, try to do anything, he will see you.
Mm.
And that represents the eagle. So that's why I asked. So he's saying
That
whatever you do, wherever you are, he will see you.
maybe that's what God's saying. You know, if the thing is that in this context here, he's not really talking about. Oh, actually, he does. You know, he says, from there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from afar. So maybe God's saying that the eagle is able to see very far away, and God is able to do the same, or to a greater degree. That could also be part of it. You know, yeah. You know,
The eagle soar, like soaring.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't think that God is referring here to eagles being spiritual creatures.
No.
I don't think that God's referring to it that way here. I do think that Jesus uses birds to represent spiritual entities in a lot of his proverbs, like the proverb of the sower, the proverb of the mustard seed. Those kinds of proverbs, the birds in those mustard seeds seem to be referring to evil spiritual entities. Job also seems to indicate that the eagle is a heavenly creature because it resides in the lowest heaven, the first heaven, while it's flying. And he's like, even the eagle can't detect what humans are able to find. Remember in the 28th chapter when he's talking about wisdom and stuff?
so it means the eagle can detect everything.
Yeah, but Job himself says that even the eagle can't detect everything that humans are able to. Like the eagle can't see gold and diamonds and silver and lithium and coal that reside within the ground and oil. The eagle doesn't know anything about that. But Job is like humans do. And so we're greater than the eagle. And it seems to me here that God is talking about the greatness of the eagle and its design. This is my understanding of this is what I think God's referring to. Like he's like, God, the eagle is excellent at flying. It's excellent at seeing. It's excellent at making nests where no one else can. And I created that creature. This is one of my creations. So if it's this good, that says something about me, you know, about my greatness in intellect. And that's kind of what I think that God's getting at here. I think that these various creatures are highlighting God's majesty in a variety of different perspectives. His power, his intellect, his goodness, you know, that kind of stuff. And so since God is all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly wise, and perfectly good, That means that we can trust his actions. That means that we should obey his commands. And we should give him the utmost honor and glory. We should treat him as more important than any king, any father, any child, any parent. He is greater than all of them, and we should treat him as such. And we need to also fear him. You know, what did Jesus say about fearing God with regard to man? He was like, do not fear those who can kill your body and then can do nothing. But to him who can kill the body and then afterwards has the authority to cast you into hell, fear him. So God is somebody that we should respect perfectly and more than anyone else.
Fear the one who can kill the soul. I don't fear the one who can kill the body.
Yeah, not just the body. Yep. So God ought to be respected and obeyed and trusted. This is what God's getting at, in my opinion. What do you guys think? If there aren't anything else with 39, we can go ahead and read 40. I was about to say 34.
Oh, wow.
We went back. Hope you guys like Job, because we're going to be talking about him again. All right, so just waiting for my computer to bring up Job chapter 40, and we'll go ahead and go through it. There we go. All right, so Job chapter 40. And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be in the right? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity. Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone who is proud and abase him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces to the world in the world below. Then I also will acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you. Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength in his loins, and his power in his muscles, in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. And for the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the locust plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? All right, so what do you guys think? John? This might be the section where God's talking about dinosaurs.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps that's what the behemoth is.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
it says, behemoth is unknown.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's hard to say. It's not known. Perhaps.
But isn't behemoth supposed to be a large creature?
Yeah, it seems to be a large creature. God seems to be speaking about it in that it's a very big, powerful creature.
Yeah.
It sounds like the T-Rex.
Sounds more like a long necked dinosaur to me.
Yeah.
Because something with hands, though. Because God with hands.
It's talking of mammoth.
Maybe.
Mammoth, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh, they had woolly mammoths back in those days. Like it was like it looked like an elephant, but it was fuzzy and it had like horns.
It had a lot of hair on it. It was
You
a
know,
mammoth
horns.
creature was
Yeah, woolly
similar
mammoth.
to a dinosaur. you know,
Yeah.
So, but it says something basically unknown. So there's not much say. There's not much talk of it in Scripture. So
It's just that God describes it, he says it, he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. And a tail as big as a tree doesn't really sound like a woolly mammoth.
No, woolly mammoths didn't have that long tail.
Didn't have a big, thick, strong tail, but whenever you see a dinosaur, it has at least in the books, it has a really big, thick, stiff tail.
Yeah.
like a T-Rex.
Yeah.
T-Rex has it, Brontosaurus.
But remember, he's saying that he eats leafy greens.
Yeah.
So
You know,
that
so
is not a T-Rex.
He eats grass like an ox. You know, so it could be
Brontosaurus.
well,
Yeah.
an animal like that,
Yeah.
perhaps. You know, who knows?
Mammoth creatures, could be any one type of thing like that. So it's like, who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Well, some dinosaurs were herbivore and some were carnivore.
Yep. So it would seem the behemoth is some kind of herbivore.
Brontosaurus is the brontosaurus. They're herbivores.
Yeah, and so wasn't the Triceratops too? They were
Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have so many darn dinosaurs you don't even know what they are. It's like unless you watch Jurassic
Simon, I think I asked this question before, but I'm not sure. Unicorns, were they ever really real or was they fictitious?
We talked about it a little bit tonight. I personally don't think that the horse with the one horn ever existed. I do think that the unicorn was that the Bible translates and says unicorn is referring to a rhinoceros, and then later on it morphed in English, because English is such a flawed language, into this idea of a horse with one horn.
I got taught as a young child, Simon. As a young child, I got taught that the reason why unicorns didn't make it on Noah's Ark to be saved, so they were extinct before they could be saved on Noah's Ark. Before the great flood, that the unicorns missed getting on the ark, so they got extinct. That's what I was taught as a child.
Okay, yeah. The only issue is that we don't have any fossils of anything that looks like a unicorn. You know, we don't have anything.
It's like mythology.
Yeah, so
Greek mythology.
it is mythology. But, you know, that's the thing about unicorns, is that they're elusive. So maybe they've been in hiding this entire time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see a unicorn when we go to heaven.
Maybe.
We'll see animals up there, but not like a cat or a dog.
But going to chapter 40, you know, God starts off this chapter, you know, kind of ending off his speech, talking and saying, "Shall the fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it." So this is God inviting Job to answer his questions. And how does Job answer the questions? By not. He's kind of been put in his place. So, one, Job has not been afforded the opportunity to present his case before God. Instead, he's being peppered by these rhetorical questions that are meant to get Job to recognize God's majesty. And how does Job respond? He responds in a way that a man does when he recognizes the majesty of God. But God's not done with him yet. God's still not done with Job. And so God is like, okay, that was round one. Let's go for round two. And God's like, dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where have we heard this before? God said these exact words to Job right after he was like, who is this who darkens counsel with words without knowledge? He was like, dress for action like a man. I'll question you. You'll make it known to me. So God is, he set up this, he made this command. He said this command at the beginning of round one, and now he's saying this same command again to show that he's like, all right, now it's time for round two. All right. We're wrestling.
I think he also lacks understanding, of God, through what he's going through right here in chapter 40. It's like, he's saying, when Job is saying, look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. It's like, so he's almost, I get this, that he's almost feeling sorry for himself. That he's going through this situation like this, that he's not getting a real answer from God. Although God says here in the beginning of chapter 40, moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer it. And Job wouldn't answer. He wouldn't give God an answer to what God had said to him. Puts his hand over his mouth.
So when you were saying, look on everyone who is proud and bring him low and tread down the wicked where they stand, who's saying that?
Well, isn't God telling him that?
Yeah, that's God speaking there.
Yeah, that's right. God is telling him that. I was wrong by saying Job said that, but God was telling him that. But Job would not answer God.
Yeah, it's probably because he couldn't.
Yeah, I agree.
These questions that God asked Job were not, God knew that Job wasn't going to be able to answer all this, and that is literally the point.
Yeah.
That's literally the point. These are rhetorical questions. These aren't questions that God actually expects Job to be able to answer. God knows that Job can't answer them, and that's why God asked them. They're not meant to be answered directly. They're meant to be the answer. Mm-hmm. They reveal the answer when you understand them in the proper context. These are the kinds of questions that aren't meant to be answered. They are meant to provide you with the answer. And so like that's what's going on here.
I'd like to say something in regards, I know time is moving on here very quickly, but I'd like to say something. I worked on a job for 10 years as a janitor, custodian, whatever, at Montville High School when it first opened up. And the year I got saved, back in 1976, I got picked on so bad by different people, and I was going around cleaning, praising God and everything else, and since school was out, at the end of the day, I could smoke cigarettes, and I knew that the Lord didn't want me smoking cigarettes, so every time I lit up a cigarette, I'd say, praise God, He's delivered me from cigarettes. And that went on for almost a whole year. And one morning I woke up and got dressed and everything, went to work, and the whole day went by. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were going to get out at 3:30, and a guy asked me, one of the janitors asked me for a cigarette, and I says, "Praise God, I was set free from cigarettes." And I didn't smoke a cigarette after that. All the way to this time, I still don't smoke. But, you know, I got ridiculed, picked on, and everything. And then one day, one of my bosses came up to me a few days later, and he says, "I want you to do something. There's marks all over your hallway. Someone put a magic marker in all through the whole hallway after school closed. I want you to clean them." I says, "I didn't do that." And he says, "But I want you to clean it, and it's going to take some time. So you may have to stop cleaning your rooms and just empty the garbage and do that." And I says, "No, I'm not going to do it." And he says, "Then you're fired." And I left, and on the way home, I was praising God, and I got home, and I told my wife, I said, "I was fired 10 years. She said, "What are you going to do?" I says, "I don't know." And I says, "Pray with me." We began to pray, and we prayed for a long time, prayed the next day, and God gave me a message. And I knew it was the Lord. He told me to go to Norwich to the school bus company and apply for a school bus driver. And I didn't have a license for that. But you know, I says, "God," I says, if this is what you want me to do, I will do it." And I took the written test. I passed it 100%. They took me out
Wow.
driving, and I never drove stick shift
Oh,
before.
wow.
I went out driving with an instructor. They took me around, and they says, "You're a natural.
Hmm.
You can really drive these things." And so I went to DMV, and they took me out, and he says, "Boy, you drive this thing like you've driven it for a long time." And I said, "I just started it." And he goes, "Really?" And I says, "Yeah." And I got my school bus driver's license, and I started working, and I started talking to the drivers, ministering to them and everything. People were getting saved. And I drove for that company for 10 years in Norwich. And all the roads around, I learned them and everything else like that. But, you know, I knew, I heard from the Lord, and I wasn't going to fight against God, saying, "I don't want to drive a school bus, I want a better job than this," you know. I think I got $8, $9 an hour or something like that. But while I was driving, one day I was, you know, I know all things are possible with God. When I was driving one day, I had to go out to Baltic Academy out there. And then there was kids that lived over on Versailles. I'm going out that road, and I see this big mill, and it says Amstock Corporation, sugar company, that makes boxes and packets and stuff like that. And the Lord says, "Go over there and apply for a job."
Oh, wow.
Went over there and I applied for a job, and they hired me right on the spot.
That's what they used to do back in the day. Hire you right on the
Yeah.
spot. No,
And
after an interview, you're hired. Here's your job.
and you know, I see about what Job went through, and you know, you've heard my testimony about my health and stuff like that over the years. And I know the Lord can speak and He can do anything.
Oh, yeah.
If we have an open mind, we seek the Lord, and He can change whatever circumstances, whatever they may be. And I truly know that, and as a minister, pastor, chaplain, reverend, whatever, I've got all these titles, but, God can work anything out, you know, and I know, the end result in Job's life, you know, and even though it ends in 42, you know, it seems like, you know, I wish it would continue to go even further than that, but that's the way his life was. So everybody has experiences and different things, and we're here like the word says, iron sharpens iron. You know, we help one another, strengthen one another, and unfortunately, Job didn't have that in his life. You know, because he had people that criticized him, put him down, said he was a sinner, said this about him, that about him, so on and so forth. And, you know, our past life, the way it was and the way it is today, you know, God called you to be a preacher, teacher, you know, to minister to people through the word. And, you know, his hand is upon your life as it is upon my life, as it is upon our lives here. So, whether one is weak, you know, we have to strengthen one another. So, but I know it's 8 o'clock, but
All right. Well, I think that's about it for our Bible study. So let's go ahead and close us in prayer. John, would you like to do the honors? Close us out in prayer?
No, I'm a little too unprofessional right now.
Okay, that's fine. Caroline?
Yes. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for gathering here at this Bible study. We know we're in the presence of Simon as he taught us about Job and he enlightened us about Job. We want to just Jesus, I wish that we get home safe and we have safe travels as we're traveling tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.